A lot of these videos out here tells you all these different tools you need. You need to go get yourself an air gun or this or that. All these special tools, and you might not have that at your disposal. So I'm going to take the most basic tools possible and do this job and put myself in a position that someone might be in out here too. The first thing you're going to need is a jack that supports the weight of your vehicle and a jack stand. Make sure it is secured underneath it properly. Then you're going to need to take your tire off. Most people have lug wrenches inside your vehicle. Once the tire's removed, and right here we've got access to our rotor, our brakes, brake caliper bracket, and all that good stuff. First thing I did was go pick up a brand new rotor, because in this situation it's best to go ahead and just change the rotor, the inner and outer bearing, and everything at one time. That way it's out of the way, and this was only about $50 at CarQuest. This is model number YH145310. Take your VIN number on your vehicle into your local parts store. They should be able to run the VIN number and get the exact part for your vehicle. Now what we're going to be working with here today is the most basic set of tools possible. I've got all kinds of different tools. You want some good quality tools, make sure to check out what's on the Backwoods Mechanic channel. A bunch of different tool reviews for you, different quality products for different people. But today I'm going to prove that if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you're trying to get the most basic repair done, especially during this pandemic, you want to save yourself some money, you cannot afford to go to a garage. This is also reviewed in the description box below. I have been using these for different situations, and they've been holding up perfectly fine. It's a 15-piece combination wrench set by Hyper Tough, cost me $16 on sale. Also got this 1/2-inch drive socket wrench set by Jobsmart, which you can pick up at Tractor Supply. These tools I'm going to be using for today's job, along with a pair of Kobalt needle nose pliers, this striking cap screwdriver, a little $2 hammer from CarQuest. You're going to need to take this brake caliper off, then you're going to need to take this bracket off. The brake caliper slide bolts are right here. You got one up top, one right here on the bottom. Then you're going to have this bracket. The bracket has a fastener right here and one right down here beneath it. And on this particular truck, it is going to be a 13mm, so I'm just going to take myself a 13mm in this situation. Left is going to be right because it's facing me. Down to the next one, break it loose and start lightly prying your caliper off here. Just wiggle it back and forth until it's nice and loose. Just don't let it fall off here and hit the ground. Take it, hook it around through here. You can pry it off here, bring it right up. Remove your brake pads, and we have an 18mm. Peck it with a hammer just a little bit and it'll start breaking it loose. Now if you hit it a little bit too hard, you don't got a 6-point wrench, it's liable to strip it out. You hold it right here, take yourself a little ball peen hammer and just tap on it a little bit at a time, and it should loosen them up. Now here's this fastener. Once this one's out of here, you just set it out of the way. Now you got access to your rotor. The thing you're going to want to do is get this outside cap off. You just take it, tap it, spin it around a little bit, do the same thing on the other side. This should pop right off here. The customer assumed that it was a wheel bearing that was bad. It turned out not to be the wheel bearing that was causing the main problem. The whole time he said he bought this truck, he's had it a few years. He keeps putting tires on it. It's wearing out his tires on both sides. He figured he had some issues with it. Inner and outer tie rods, upper and lower ball joints, things like that, which we are going to look at and change in the future, because he does have a tie rod issue right here that needs to be changed. However, I want to point out something on this. It is not actually the wheel bearing that's causing the problem. It's the rotor itself. And whoever put this on initially should have noticed this from the get-go. These rotors themselves, factory defect rotors, and what I mean by that is look closely here at the top half of this. You see how close it is? It's nice and even. It's not got a very big lip on it. Now as I spin it around through here on the other side, you're going to notice that it is substantially different right here. That is a major difference in how big of a gap there is right there. You see how close it is? And if I roll it around to this side, you see how big of a hump that is. It's actually got an egg shape to it. And if I spin the rotor around, you'll see what I'm talking about here. The rotor itself is warped on this thing. As you can see right there, you see it going up and down like you're rolling an egg down the hill. Because of that, we need to change this rotor, which is why we picked one up. But while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and put brand new bearings in it. That way this job will be good and done. The next thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a pair of needle nose pliers. Get this Carter key out right here. Then you're going to want to get that spindle nut off here out of the way. We're going to pull this rotor off here, get the bearings changed. Clean this grease off. Definitely have some brake clean, something like that handy, because you're going to get really dirty. Probably want to wear some gloves. Here's what this looks like. Carter key on the outside right here. They rolled this up that way this quarter key doesn't come loose and it doesn't unspool this, and you got all kinds of problems if you don't put this on here correctly. You don't put the quarter key and bend it right, all that kind of stuff. Whenever you put this back in, it will loosen up, and then your damn wheel's gonna fall off. You take yourself the needle nose pliers here, pull this down out of the way, bend it down. You're gonna want to have another quarter key. Don't worry, they're very cheap and inexpensive. You can pick one up just about a quarter or so at your local store. There's your quarter key. And we're gonna take our nut right off here. It just slides right out. Once again, clean everything up so you can see what you're working with. This is going to give us a good reference on where this should be at whenever we reinstall it. It's got all kinds of fine threads on it. Some people might need that as an indicator on where to put the fastener back on at. This is a 1 1/16 or 27 millimeter fastener. Shouldn't be on there too tight. If it's on there too tight, it's going to seize that wheel bearing up. Now you can see that there is bigger threads right here, and this was right on the edge of it, and that's where this nut should go back at. You tighten it too tight, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Now most of the time you can take this rotor, grab it from each side, and when you pull it off and down, it should pull this bearing right off with it. As you can see right there, your outer bearing, it's this little one here. Pull your rotor right off. But there's your inner bearing. Now we're going to want to inspect this spindle here, because if this is damaged, you can't go no further. If you put anything on this and it's damaged, you're just going to have to do it again. If it's damaged in any way, you got to go get a new spindle and put on here. And most of the time that entails you going to a junkyard and buying this whole piece right here, just putting the whole new piece on. This thing is wore out when it shouldn't be, then you're going to have problems. It won't let the bearing sit on there correctly. It'll make it wobble and all that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that everything is nice and cleaned off. There's no damage, there's no scuff marks, there's no oval shape, things like that, because of the fact that the rotor was bad and it was bouncing around. You know, the tire was more than likely bouncing because of the oval shape of the actual rotor itself, and more than it was the bearing, because if it was the bearing itself, then it would have caused problems long before now. But you always want to make sure in this type of situation. Yeah, I have inspected everything here. Nothing seems to really be out of line that I can tell. Everything on the inside, outside looks pretty good on both sides. I mean, nothing here is loose or anything. If this was loose, damaged, broken, I think it's South Main Auto, I believe, has got a video out, but it was put out a few years ago, where he had a customer that drove it to the shop with a broken spindle, and he had no option but to go to a junkyard and to replace this whole thing because it was the cheapest option for him. He kind of goes into detail on all that kind of stuff. If I find the video, I'll link it in the description box below. Shout out to South Main Auto. Anybody hasn't checked out his channel, go check it out. It could be very useful to people out here trying to save yourself some money and do your own repairs. The next thing on our list today is to go ahead and match up this brand new rotor right here with the old one. Make sure everything's good. Go ahead and match up the inner and outer bearing that we got picked up, pack it full of grease, and then reinstall it all back on this truck for our customer. Both of them have the 5-stud pattern. Both of them appear to be the same shape and size, and of course the brand new one right here, there's no egg shape to it. It's round all the way around, unlike this one here. This one you couldn't really tell it by just looking at it, but now the outside you could definitely tell. It's fatter on this side, thinner on this side. It was definitely a factory defect, and somebody should have noticed this whenever they put it on the customer's vehicle in the past. Like I said, he's been driving this thing, he said, for a few years now, ate his tires up, and it has been this problem the entire time. So what we got here is these two different sets of rotors. We got the bearings and everything that come with it. National Oil Seals 4148 right here, that's this. And we've got our little tiny outer bearing. This is A12. Our inner bearing here, which is A18. This is your inner bearing. This one's going to go inside here. And you've got your outer bearing. These do come with a race when you get them. You got to pack these full of grease and stick them inside the inner and outer of the rotor. So you're going to want to make sure to match these up, because some places might give you the wrong part. You want to make sure you got the right bearing put back in place whenever you're working on these things. Now this is when you're definitely going to want to have some rubber gloves handy. Get yourself some high temperature grease right here, right there inside your glove, and then you take your bearing here and just start slapping it. You're going to want to pack it plumb full of as much grease as possible. You're going to want to sit here and do this and turn it the whole time you're doing it. I'm going to do it a few times, go all the way around it here back and forth. And I'm going to continuously turn the bearing, and I'm going to keep doing it over and over again until it's packed plumb full of grease. Go ahead and take our bigger bearing. This one goes on the inside. I'm going to do the same thing to it. Now that I've got this one packed completely full of grease, we're going to go ahead and pack the rotor before we put this one in. Now this one little bucket of grease that I showed you a few minutes ago should be everything you need to get this job done. All you got to do is pack this hole plumb full of grease, pack them bearings plumb full of grease, and then you shouldn't have no problems to worry about. It's a messy job for sure, but we're not trying to be clean. We're trying to be accurate. We're trying to get this job done right. Now this will be why you need some brake clean, because you're going to get your rotor a little bit dirty, a little bit greasy. You got this big hole right here though. You're going to want to take a big gob of this grease right here, stick it all inside that hole. Make sure that it is filled plumb up, because whenever your tires get hot from driving and speeding and all that kind of stuff, you're going to heat this stuff up. You're going to want to keep them wheel bearings well lubricated. Right now is the point where you can take this bearing right here, your bigger one. You're going to stick it right down inside this hole right here. And once that's in place, you're going to want to slap yourself some grease around this. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take this oil seal, you're going to put it right here, and you're going to tap it in place. And then just go around it, tapping it all the way around the corners, a little bit at a time, back and forth, side to side, hold it down. You can see right there, it's knocked into place. It's nice and flush. It will help keep some grease right in behind this bearing right here. Now this is your biggest thing by far, is making sure you got the right parts and you do the job right. It's going to have plenty of grease around it. That's essential to this repair getting done right and your wheel bearings lasting a good long time. So you take it, make sure you got it on there around that oil seal. Whenever you got it in here, you're going to want to take that oil seal there and you're going to slide it around the outside collar of that spindle. When you get to that outside collar, you're going to want to push. And that oil seal will take that little rubber and it will expand and it'll go over top of the collar that was on that spindle. When it does that, it's mounted where it's supposed to be. Have you packed it plumb full of grease in the middle, you ain't got to worry about it. You got yourself a grease gun, take a greasing needle. All you have to do is put your grease needle in there, pump your grease gun, it'll pack it full of grease for you. And if it's packed plumb full of grease in the backside, you push it in, you're going to have that little bit of resistance. It's going to have little bubbles of grease coming through and in between the bearing right here, and that's what you want. That means that the pressure from it's going to help do the job for you, packing this thing full of grease, which this one just done. You could hear the air coming out, kind of like an air bubble sound when something relieves pressure. Now we'll be ready to put our washer back on. You'll notice right here that it's flat on two sides of it. And that's because this is flat right here on the top and the bottom. Push that right back in place. You're gonna take your spindle fastener here, get it run back in there. This was not really tight whenever we took it off. We're not gonna make it too tight when we put it on here. If you have a torque wrench, that's the greatest thing in the world to make sure you got the right amount of torque. Otherwise, you just wanna snug it up a little bit. You don't wanna over tighten it, you don't wanna leave it too loose. You wanna put it just tight enough to where it's got enough pressure on that outer bearing to hold this rotor on, hold it in place. Then spin your rotor around here, see what it feels like, make sure it's not real loose, anything like that. If it starts coming back on you, it's a little bit too loose. And if you put it a little bit too tight when you're driving down the road, you gotta think that's the tightening direction. I've seen people have issues with other mechanics, put something on a little bit too tight, they driving down the road and their damn wheels lock up on them. Now once you got that in place, all you gotta do is take your little castle nut right here, stick it right back in place. It's gonna have to line up with where that Carter key goes in at, and that's gonna help you make that adjustment one way or the other. I'm gonna run my Carter key back down in here, down through the bottom of it. You're gonna wanna pry up on the outside of it here, that way you know that the Carter key is locked up against the outside of the spindle here, just like it was when we took it off. Now we're gonna take our outside dust cap right here, we're gonna put us a little bit more grease inside there, and we're gonna knock it back on. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is take yourself some brake clean. If you ain't got brake clean, take something else. Get all the grease off of this rotor. And you don't want grease to be on your brake pads, your rotors, things like that when you're going down the road. Now the next thing to do is going to be putting your bracket back on. You're going to want to go ahead and crack open this bleeder plug right here. It is a 3/8 on this truck. All you got to do is take it, barely crack it open. You can leave your socket in place. I'm going to gently loosen this up while I compress this dual piston spreader. You can also do it with a C-clamp if need be. I'm going to loosen it by hand, push it down, and then I can tighten it up by hand as soon as it's moved enough for my clearance. I'll take it and see if it'll go around my brake pads here now. These are your slide pins. You're gonna wanna make sure these are nice, loose, greased up. They move back and forth real good. You got a flat spot right here on your caliper where the bolt goes. You're gonna wanna make sure it goes in place nice and flat. Keeps everything good and lined up. Nice and snug. Now you're ready to put your wheel, your lug nuts back on, tighten everything up, and take it for a test drive.